President Trump is vowing to abandon talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un if the meeting is not fruitful. He says he'll cancel the meeting or walk out. The president and Kim Jong Un are expected to meet sometime in the coming weeks. And this comes after CIA Director Mike Pompeo made a secret trip to North Korea just weeks ago. Major Garrett has more.
I will be meeting with Kim Jong Un in the coming weeks to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Appearing with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, President Trump said the anticipated summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un might not happen or resolve differences.
If I think that it's a meeting that is not going to be fruitful, we're not going to go. If the meeting when I'm there is not fruitful, I will respectfully leave the meeting.
Summit planning continues, and possible locations include the Peace Village inside the Korean demilitarized zone, a U.S. naval ship off the Korean coast, or neutral locations ranging from Mongolia to Sweden.
There's a good chance of doing it. We're having very good dialogue.
The president said negotiations also include seeking the release of an American businessman and 2 teachers imprisoned in North Korea.
I'm working hard to get every senator that vote that I can.
CIA Director Mike Pompeo's nomination for Secretary of State is facing an uncertain future.
He just left North Korea, had a great meeting with Kim Jong Un.
The White House is using Pompeo's clandestine North Korea trip meant to lay groundwork for a summit to underscore the need for Senate confirmation.
It's better to be talking.
Senator Bill Nelson, a Democrat who opposed Pompeo's nomination for CIA director, said the North Korean gambit could change his mind.
That puts him in a better light, in my mind, yes.
And CBS News Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett is traveling with the president. He's joining me now from West Palm Beach, Florida. So, Major, Mike Pompeo certainly seems to be acting like the Secretary of State, but, you know, he hasn't gone through his confirmation hearing yet. What do you suppose, what sort of impact do you think his visit to North Korea will have on his bid to become the Secretary of State?
Well, it's meant to have a decisive impact on the Senate, as particularly Senate Republicans. The White House said yesterday it is crucial to national security for Mike Pompeo to be confirmed as the next Secretary of State. And this clandestine trip to North Korea is meant to underscore his importance as a trusted advisor to President Trump. And in the main, his confirmation is still more likely than not, even if it gets difficult in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, because even if that committee deadlocks or votes no, the nomination can be moved to the floor separately by procedure by the Senate Majority Leader, giving the full Senate an opportunity to vote on it. But Rand Paul, the Kentucky Republican, is very important on this. Republicans can't afford to lose any votes if all Democrats vote against Pompeo. So it is uncertain. And the White House is making a concerted national security argument that Pompeo was sent to North Korea not just because the president wants him confirmed as Secretary of State, but because he is one of his most trusted advisors. And as conversations proceed with the North Koreans, in whatever atmosphere or whatever dimension or whatever location for that matter, Pompeo is going to be central to those conversations. So the argument from the White House is, what's the goal? To denuclearize the North Korean government and people. That's a big goal, a huge accomplishment if achieved. Why would you deny the president one of his most trusted advisors in the midst of that process? That's the White House argument, and it's going to weigh heavily on the minds of Senate Republicans as they consider Pompeo's nomination.
So denuclearization is obviously the ultimate goal, but there may be little goals as we go along. And the thing about this meeting that Mike Pompeo had with Kim Jong Un is he didn't really come away, as far as we know, with any sort of concrete agreements, like perhaps, you know, the release of American prisoners that are being held in North Korea, maybe something like that, before we agree to the actual big meeting between the heads of these 2 countries. Is that, you know, am I reading too much into that, or are these pre-meetings not about getting this sort of stuff done?
Well, those are important questions, and the president was asked yesterday at the press conference at Mar-a-Lago by Mark Landler of the New York Times, is securing the release of those 3 Americans a precondition for any summit with Kim Jong Un? The president didn't answer that, leaving that out there as a negotiating chip. But this president is going to have to reconcile himself to the fate of those 3 Americans in the context of whether a summit occurs or doesn't occur. And to the point of what did Mike Pompeo get out of this meeting, for what we know right now, very little. Now, more may come in the future, but it's important to note that because of the long history of Americans seeking to engage the North Koreans, either not getting anything out of that engagement or getting representations and promises from the North Koreans to do things to end or curtail their nuclear program that are then ignored as the North Koreans continue to move forward. That's happened with previous administrations. The Trump administration has said emphatically it's not going to make that mistake again. So it is important to watch very carefully all of the preparatory maneuvers for this summit. And I think it's vital to pay very close attention to the president's cautionary words yesterday, that if he doesn't think the meeting is going to be fruitful, it won't occur in the first place. That is the first public recognition of the idea that is becoming more clear to the administration, that it's going to be hard to put together a summit like this, because essentially the confines of this summit are to be, if you believe the Trump administration, the North Koreans show up and agree to surrender, give up all their nuclear weapons, the one thing that has made them a semi-relevant player in global politics and is the very identity of Kim Jong Un's regime. That's a big ask. So, the president introducing cautionary words, whether the summit will even occur, I think is very important, because the administration knows how tough the pre-negotiations are going to be to achieve a summit.
Yeah, you know, not just that, we actually don't have a specific date or location. Initially, when we heard about this summit, we were told that it would happen sometime in May, and suddenly things got really, really vague. We know that North and South Korea are going to be meeting next week. How closely will the Trump administration be watching what happens with that meeting?
Very closely, because that could be history in of itself. If the North Koreans and the South Koreans agree to formally end the Korean War, which has existed under a very tense armistice since the end of hostilities in 1953, that would signal a possible rapprochement between the North and the South. That could lead to reunification. It could lead to a lot of things, but you can't get to any of those other exchanges of people, trade, cultural interactions, education, any of the basic fundamentals that countries that agree with each other or have decent relations with each other achieve until you end the war. And ending the war is not just about symbolism. It's about beginning a process of a new kind of relationship on the Korean Peninsula. So that's a backdrop for all these conversations about denuclearization. Because if the North Korea government is serious about that, giving up its nuclear weapons, what that means is it's serious about a different kind of ideology, a different kind of economic future, possibly a different kind of political future. The United States has made it clear it will help in that process, but you've got to give up your nuclear weapons. Aligning itself, or at least ending hostilities with South Korea, could be a first step in that direction. So the administration will watch it carefully.
All right, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Michael Cohen. So there are reports out now that President Trump has been sort of calling up some of his friends and asking their opinion on the situation with Michael Cohen. One of those friends reportedly is Jay Goldberg, a former lawyer who worked with him during his divorces. And we are hearing that Jay Goldberg warned him that Michael Cohen, despite his loyalty to the president, under the pressure of an investigation, possibly facing jail time if that's what it comes to, could flip on the president. What are you hearing about any of this?
Nothing directly on that. I've really been focused on trade, Japan, North Korea, the summit, and all those related issues. But I'm reading the same things you're reading. And I will only say this, based on my conversations with those around the president. Is there a generalized anxiety about Michael Cohen flipping and turning on the president? Of course there is. How could there not be? Is there generalized anxiety, and has there been for months, about Rick Gates or Paul Manafort flipping on the president? Yes, of course there is. Unless, as the president says over and over, there's nothing to flip about. That might be true with Manafort, it might be true of Gates. We don't know all the things that Michael Cohen did in his unique self-described role as fixer for Donald Trump before he was a political figure. That could be more complicated, that could be much stickier. Cohen has represented to me and almost everyone who's ever talked to him that he is fiercely loyal to Donald Trump, and that fierceness is now going to be tested. I can only say that there's a generalized anxiety about how resilient that loyalty will be.
Indeed. Major Garrett in sunny Florida, West Palm Beach, thank you so much.
You got it.